Ukrainian forces are short on certain supplies, like flak jackets and medical kits. So a couple in Boulder has stepped up to help. And it's not the first time. Victoria Olinek and Andrei Zakutayev run Sunflower Seeds Ukraine, named for the national symbol of their native country. To date, they've provided more than 450 medical kits and dozens of pieces of tactical gear. By the way, you'll hear their 4-month-old son in the background. Victoria, Andrei, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here today.
As we sit down together, news has broken of the first war crimes trial related to the Russian invasion. A 21-year-old Russian soldier has pled guilty to shooting a 62-year-old man. The man's widow was in the courtroom in Kyiv. I wonder if that news has reached both of you and how it has been to watch this latest phase of the war unfold.
Yes, absolutely. We've been staying on top of the news, at the same time trying to focus on being useful. But it's been shock after shock. And in terms of war crimes, it's great to see that the people who committed the crimes are being punished. But we know these war crimes are happening all over. So it's not that much of a shock with this particular soldier being found guilty or being in court. Yeah, it's just heartbreaking that we also know that we probably, at this point in the war, we know about a very small percentage of those war crimes, and they'll be unfolding and unfolding, I think, in the days, months, and possibly years to come.
Andrei, do you still have family in Ukraine, and how are they doing, if so?
We do. Our immediate family, our parents are in Western Ukraine, where it's considered to be safe. And that means, there's an airstrike every now and then, and alarm pretty much every day. So I guess it's as good as it gets these days. We also have a lot of extended family all over Ukraine. In the Kyiv region, for example, one of my aunts has spent months pretty much in isolation under Russian occupation and has survived there, and finally was able to came out a couple of weeks ago on the connection again. So we know that she's alive. We also have close friends who have relatives have been evacuated from Mariupol, which is a city that has been on the news recently a lot.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, and also have relatives who are defending Ukraine in the front lines.
So they're actually part of the forces. So let's talk about Sunflower Seeds' biggest win since the invasion and perhaps your biggest setback. So, Andrei, do you want to start with a victory for your organization?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. The biggest victory so far has been the consistency and the rhythm that we've been able to achieve in providing tactical medical aid to the front lines of the defenders. Not just doing it once or twice, but doing it consistently with learning all the bottlenecks of the logistics process and figuring out all the problems and trying to avoid those problems of the logistics of delivery next time. I would say that's probably the biggest thing.
And what sorts of equipment has that been, by the way?
These are mostly individual first aid kits, or IFAKs as they're being called. And these include tactical medical equipment such as tourniquets, emergency compression bandages, hemostatic agents to stop the blood loss, chest seals in case you are shot in the chest, those kinds of things.
And so the point here is that there are many organizations doing humanitarian aid relief. This is direct aid to those on the front lines. As you've said, that includes some of your own family. Victoria, what's been the biggest setback so far?
One of the biggest setbacks has been shortage of supplies, such as supplies of medical aid. Within the days of the war starting, tactical medical aid was very difficult to find in Europe. Now it's also becoming difficult to find in the United States. Like initially, we were able to buy things on Amazon and have it delivered quickly. And now we have to find small stores in the country that have some online presence, online shops, and from them. So that itself, just finding it, working with them takes more time.
Add to that now even most of the small stores don't have any more stock available, and we have to contact the big suppliers, pretty much the manufacturers of this equipment, and get in line to pre-order things like 1 month in advance. So we have to plan everything very carefully for what we're going to ship in 1 month from now already today.
I have to say, there's just a little bit of joy that enters our conversation when I hear you're 4-month-old. And I imagine that a child right now is a source of some hope. But it sounds like perhaps some supply chain issues that are hitting you, as they have so many around the globe, really. So I understand this isn't the first time you've had to set up a system to send supplies to Ukraine. So Victoria, talk just briefly about how you got started in 2014, which was a time of some tumult as well.
Well, in 2014, it was a similar situation. Russia attacked Ukraine. We are far away. We wanted to do something to help and not just watch the news in desperation. So we still have strong connections back home with friends and volunteers and organizations that have a lot of impact.
That's right. So we reached out to our friends and colleagues back in Ukraine who are part of the local scouting organization called Plus. At that time, we did kind of peer-to-peer help, peer-to-peer connections. We sent quantities of dozens, let's say, of these individual first aid kits or their components to Ukraine. It was much easier back then because only a part of Ukraine was in a state of the war. Planes were flying to Ukraine, so we could ship things directly there. Now the scale of what we are doing is much bigger, so we are doing hundreds rather than dozens of these individual first aid kits. But also the logistics is much more challenging because we have to send everything through Poland.
Through Poland. So I hear that you are dealing with larger quantities, but more difficult inroads to Ukraine. Do you think you've saved lives, Victoria?
Yes, absolutely. I hope so. I do not have statistics to tell you how many of the medical kits we've sent have been used, but we surely hope that it helps save lives on the front lines, because we do know that many of those people do not have proper medical aid kits, do not have proper protective gear.
And every time we send these individual first aid kits one at a time, or now 100 at a time, we do hope that they never get used.
I can I can understand that. Do I have it right as well that you've sent tactical gear like bulletproof vests, Andrei?
That's right. That was another perhaps surprising thing that we learned during this campaign, that even the most advanced and well-equipped brigades and military units that are really at the hottest zone in the front lines do not have protective gear such as bulletproof vests. So we've partnered with a military unit called 95th Brigade. They are some of the paratroopers, some of the most advanced paratroopers that are working in Ukraine, to help them get some very advanced bulletproof vests that are much lighter than what they currently have to help them.
I wonder if you're at all torn. Like, I can imagine being grateful to be safe in the United States, and yet perhaps yearning to be close to those fighting in Ukraine. Does that capture it, do you think, Victoria? Do you feel torn about this?
Yes, absolutely. It's difficult. It's difficult to be away. It's also difficult to figure out how to live a normal life here, or at least attempt to, because we are surrounded by people who are, of course, empathetic and impacted, but still the life is going on in this country, so we have to partake in that. And at the same time, we are grateful to be able to help, and we are trying to find the opportunities that are accessible to us to help Ukraine and people who are still there.
Yeah.
One thing I would add to that as a male person, maybe I feel even more torn that statistically on average people would do, because all male in Ukraine are liable for military defense. And, I almost feel like jumping on the plane and going there and doing my part. And then I also have to remind myself of the family that I have here, and perhaps the impact that I could do by knowing how to buy things in the United States and how to raise money and how to ship that to Ukraine. I could probably save more lives by doing that than jumping on a plane, getting a gun in Ukraine, and going to the front line.
It sounds like you've given that a lot of thought. Well, I wonder if there are needs being expressed in Ukraine beyond the kits and the vests that you'd like to meet. Do you think that this could grow into something else, Victoria?
Yes, the needs are absolutely overwhelming, like humanitarian needs. People need support with housing, even finding housing, paying for housing. People need diapers, food, like in the areas that are occupied or that were occupied recently. It's difficult to get access to food and just basic life supplies and medications. Hospitals were destroyed. There is no access to medical care and medical supplies.
Is that a need that you think you can meet, Andriy?
Yes, and we do have humanitarian projects. For example, for Easter's, we partner again with this Plast organization in Ukraine to bake special Ukrainian Easter cakes in Western Ukraine where they are, and then deliver them to the liberated parts of the Kyiv and Zhytomyr region where Russian forces have been drawn out from there by Easter. Maybe two other needs that I'll add to the list here besides humanitarian things. One that we can address and the other one that we cannot. The one that we can address are various kind of tactical gadgets and gear that make the lives of soldiers easier, but are not given out. Things like tactical goggles and knee pads and small things that really just make sure that they're not miserable. Rain ponchos, for example. That's what we do, and we pivoted recently towards that direction as well. One thing that I wish we could help, but I have no idea how to help, is gasoline and the fuel. Oil processing plants in Ukraine have been destroyed by Russian airstrike. There's a huge shortage of fuel. It's only given out to military units and some agricultural companies, so really also paramedics and firefighters and so on, only the most essential people. And really there is no way for any volunteers, for example, that work there with us to get fuel to fuel their cars and go. It's getting much more difficult to deliver supplies to the front lines because of that.
I can imagine that it's painful to see a need and not necessarily know how to meet it. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yes, I really appreciate your invitation and ability to share what we do with the listeners of the CPR.
Andriy Zakatayev and Victoria Olinek of Boulder run Sunflower Seeds Ukraine. Learn more about their mission at sunflowerseedsukraine.org.